And people said to me, "Why are you showing up, dropping your hand?" No, I was enjoying myself because I knew it was my last fight. And I remember counting down the rounds. I remember, come on, Joe, 4 rounds to go, just enjoy it. I remember saying to myself, Joe, this is the last round of your life. That was that, you know what I mean? I was happy to do the 12 rounds and just beautiful.
What's good, kings and queens? I hope everyone's having a good spring. This week's video is an alternate to my last video topic, when boxers go out sad. So pretty much who went out happy, riding off into the sunset of retirement. Some hoping one day to make it into the Hall of Fame, which the bias processing is a rant video by itself. With that being said, let's start the video. Juan Manuel Marquez had an amazing career, a career that was topped off by defeating his longtime rival Manny Pacquiao. To continue this high point in his career, he fought Tim Bradley, which he lost rather convincingly to the new boxing star. That following year, Marquez decided to have one last fight against former WBO junior welterweight champ Mike Alvarado, who just got dethroned in the previous year in his first defense after defeating Brandon Rios in their rematch. Enjoy the slideshow of the greatest vehicle ever made, the Yugo GV. Marquez looks like Marquez, maybe just a tad slower. Alvarado maybe a little bit on the gun-shy side after his brutal loss against Ruslan Provodnikov. Marquez would get the knockdown in round 8. Same round Ruslan dropped Alvarado twice in. That woke Alvarado up and he tied the knockdown count and dropped Marquez the very next round, making the final bit of the fight interesting. Marquez was able to fight on and get the wide decision on the scorecards and happily retire from the sport. Crazy enough, this was a title elimination bout to become the mandatory to face Manny Pacquiao. Now there were rumors that Marquez was offered a substantial amount of money to face Pacquiao in a 5th fight, but a good gambler knows how to walk away after a big score, and no price was changing his mind. Acelino Freitas is one of the greatest boxers to come from Brazil. Even the UFC giving the man shoutouts during their broadcast whenever they have an event down there. After brutally losing to Diego Corrales in 2004, Freitas would slowly bounce back and pick up another world title in 2006 against Zahir Rahim. Freitas was set to face rising undefeated star Juan Diaz in a unification for the WBA and WBO titles. Despite being overwhelmed by Diaz's work rate, Freitas was matching Diaz with the same energy and more accurate with his shots scoring on Diaz. For a great portion of the fight, Freitas was either up on the cards or it was dead even. After a great 7th round by both guys, the tides would change in the 8th round. Diaz will finally get the better of Freitas and really start to land at a high rate. Freitas didn't believe he could go on in the fight and retired on his stool. In comparison to the Tyson McBride fight, the expression seemed very similar and it was a look of a guy who just didn't have that fire in him to continue. And you could really get hurt that way, and good for Freitas for doing the right thing. Freitas will walk away from boxing that year. He will come back in 2012 due to a clout-chasing kid talking crap. Undefeated Brazilian boxing prospect Michael Oliveira came out on the scene claiming he's Brazil's next boxing star. With the announcement of Freitas' return, this was immediately met with doubt by the boxing media that the 36-year-old was well past his prime, just doing it for the money. The 22-year-old he's fighting is a junior middleweight, and Freitas' best days were at super featherweight and lightweight. Freitas actually came in great shape for a guy who had been out of the ring for so long. His speed was there, reflexes there, but you could hear the crowd oohing and eyeing. After putting up a flashy 2 rounds, Freitas will make Michael know, the boxing media who wrote those articles know, how good he was, and drop Michael at the end of the 3rd round.
Acciones sociales en su país.
Derecha que dolió y va con la zurda. En las cuerdas quedó enmarañado Oliveira.
Freitas will put on a show. 5 years ago, he was trying to find that fire and just go through the motions. Right there, you're seeing a guy who is genuinely having fun and rediscovered his passion. Absolutely brilliant display of defense and head movement.
Ser Oliveira.
Idea tiene, a mi juicio, de
Puede
boxeo.
haber algo importante frente, pero derecha que cruza Popó, vuelve a cruzar. Es todo nuevo para Oliveira. Nunca estuvo bajo esta presión, bajo este castigo.
Freitas was able to set up another knockdown in the 9th round and to top it off, get the knockout win later in that round.
Al piso, la derecha de Popó llegó. cronómetro, juega a favor de Freitas. Falta largo rato, más de un minuto. Con la frialdad de un definidor nato, se acabó, técnico.
Freitas will retire from boxing on top. He would come back in 2015 and once again in 2017. Those two fights he won, and he happily retired from the sport at the age of 42. 40 wins, 2 losses, 34 knockouts. After defeating Andre Berto for the NABF title in December 2013, all the way to 2018, Karas did not record a win. The closest he will ever win will be a draw against Yoshihiro Kamagai in a very exciting 10-round banger, not a single break in action. This would spawn an immediate rematch, and HBO wanted a piece, and this fight was slated as a co-main event under Tom Loeffler's Superfly card. Karas would get stopped in the 8th round after putting up a good show. In 2017, he would lose back-to-back within a 3-month span against Mauricio Herrera by majority decision and got TKO'd by Juan Carlos Abreu. To start off 2018, which would be slated as Karas' last fight, he was up against local favorite, undefeated prospect 17-0, Nico Macias. Nico and Karas are both valiant punchers, so this fight, if Karas still has one left in him, will be one for the books. Karas mostly in the corner, doing his absolute best to keep Nico off of him. Phone booth fighting, well over 100 punches thrown around. Coming to the 3rd round, both guys in total had thrown 700 punches. I think by the 4th round, both guys were punched out. Karas' corner was urging him to get a second wind. Karas was reduced to arm punches, but he would occasionally throw a loaded shot that would throw Nico's head back. Karas was getting so much work on the ropes that he started to get abrasions and cuts on his back. Despite both guys throwing powerless arm punches, Karas was getting the better of these exchanges. This will break punch stat records for most punches ever thrown in a fight. That record remained unbeaten for 25 years. Karas will not only be in the record books, but also make it out in his final fight with a razor-thin majority decision victory.
700 punches right on the dot.
Listen for the bell,
Enjoy
guys.
the rest.
Back with the video in a short bit. Be sure to hit that like button to help the rest of the good old folks be able to view this video. This video's comment section topic is, what was the fight that got you back into boxing after a hiatus of watching and following the sport? Leave in the comments. Thanks for sticking around, and let's get back to the video. The South Korean Myung-Woo Yeo was already having a historic run in the weight class alongside his fellow countryman Chang Jung-ko. Chang would beat the light flyweight record for the most title defenses at 15. Myung-Woo would tie then overtake Chang's set record with 17 title defenses, which is still a record to this date. Yeo would face Hiroki Ioka in his backyard of Japan in his 18th title defense. Hiroki is the 4-division champion Kazuto Ioka's uncle. In a big upset, Ioka would dethrone the long-reigning champion by split decision. After 2 defenses of the title, Yeo would once again travel to Ioka's backyard of Japan. He will win on the scorecards by a majority decision to recapture the light flyweight title. Yeo would fight one last time against Japanese contender Yuichi Hosono to win by a shutout in the scorecards and retire from boxing with a record of 38-1 and 14 knockouts. He was ranked number 1 by Ring Magazine prior to his retirement. Despite Yeo and Ko undisputedly considered the greatest boxers from South Korea that just happened to share the same weight class together in the same decade, these two were not inducted into the Hall of Fame together, which is a travesty. The two waiting all these years is even more. Chang wasn't recognized till 2010, almost 20 plus years after he had retired and got inducted into the Hall of Fame, and Yeo finally got inducted in 2013. This is a huge problem in the lower weight classes. The amount of disrespect and disregard is disgusting. Imagine putting up a Hall of Fame career to not be recognized because you're not in a glamour weight class. These fighters didn't have a choice. Please keep in mind, Puerto Rican legend Ivan Calderon is still waiting to be inducted into the International Boxing Hall of Fame, not to mention the great Israel Vazquez. As far as region and nationality biases in the ballots, there is a clear weight class bias as well. In the year 2000, Masamori Tokiyama will become the first North Korean world champion, defeating the WBC and lineal super flyweight champ, Injo Cho.
間違いですね。117対109ですよ、最後のポイントはね。新チャンピオン誕生です。徳山正盛。
He would then make 8 defenses of the lineal and WBC title before getting dethroned by his rival Katsushige Kawashima in an absolute shocker, getting stopped in 1 minute and 47 seconds of the first round.
And I wish him all the luck in the world in December, and he will win because he is Ichiban #1.
Masamori would bounce back in an immediate rematch and put on a show to regain the title, defeating Katsushige by a unanimous decision. He will make one last defense of the title and retire from boxing. There was one fighter Masamori wanted to face, and that was newly crowned bantamweight champion Hozumi Hasegawa. He said he will come out of retirement and fight Hozumi. The fight never ended up happening, and Masamori remained retired due to the lack of motivation. But his dream 2 years later in 2008 would come true. Hasegawa versus Tokiyama was on, but it was behind closed doors. Hasegawa was at his physical peak in his career, already made 10 defenses of the title, and Tokiyama hadn't been in the ring for 2 years.
さあここから畳みかかってすでに2度のダウンを奪っています。
This was a hard sparring match, and Tokiyama didn't look like at all he was out of the ring for so long, and looked amazing. This video would go viral upon uploading on YouTube, getting hundreds of thousands of views, which was really unheard of with boxing videos on the platform, especially two fighters most who viewing this video right now don't know of. Masamori will go on as one of the greatest super flyweights, but he's still waiting for his time to be inducted in the Hall of Fame. This is more of a partial winning and sad at the same time. Rocky had a great run. After his final defense as the heavyweight champion against Archie Moore, Marciano was forced to retire from boxing due to a back injury.
I would like to announce my retirement from boxing at this time.
The longer Rocky remained retired, the more his legend grew. Rocky flirted with the idea of coming out of retirement.
And this is when I got the urge to come back. I'd only been retired 3 years at the time. I wasn't too far out of good condition, so I went away to a training camp close to my home by myself and tried to get myself in condition again as I once did, but I just couldn't. And so I thought it best not to have any publicity on it, but just to go home and call it another day.
After all that, Marciano decided to stay retired. Steve Collins had a hell of a career, defeating Nigel Benn and Chris Eubank not once but twice, and retired from the sport after 7 successful title defenses with a record of 36-3 and 21 knockouts. When I think of the history of the super middleweight division, they had a Three Kings era in the 90s. That made the division what it is today. Eubank, Benn, and Collins, and none of these guys are in the Boxing Hall of Fame. Whose jimmies did they rustle to be blackballed for so long? That's some Pete Rose level of disrespect there. After Klitschko won the hearts of many in his efforts against Lennox Lewis, after years of hate and mistreatment from boxing fans and the media, Vitaly would become the WBC champ, defeating Corey Sanders. Unfortunately, Klitschko was forced to retire, not even a year as champion due to an injury. The WBC made Vitaly the champion emeritus. Whenever he recovers and wants to come back, he will immediately become the mandatory for the title. When Klitschko became 100% 4 years later, in his first fight back, he fought Sam Peter, who just came off beating James Toney twice, Jamil McClain in a title elimination, and knocked out Oleg Moskayev for the WBC title. Klitschko would dominate Peter, stopping him in the 8th round. Vitaly would sweep through the division, making 9 title defenses before retiring from boxing with the record of 45-2 and 41 knockouts. Upon Vitaly's immediate retirement, he will return back to his career in politics. He will become the mayor of Ukraine's capital of Kiev and stood with his people during the Ukrainian Revolution just a month after being sworn in office. In 2018, Vitaly will be inducted into the Hall of Fame. In 2022, he'll be awarded the Arthur Ashe Award for his efforts in Ukraine. After 21 successful defenses of the strawweight title, which is a record in the weight class, the chances of that being beaten is very low.
The time. He hasn't looked back. What a great The time has come here. What a great uppercut, Bobby.
The unified champion will move up to his second weight class and face IBF champion Will Grisby. Lopez then will make 2 title defenses. In 2001, a couple months after his final title defense, he would announce his retirement with a record of 51-0, 38 knockouts and 1 draw. In 2007, Lopez will be inducted into the Hall of Fame. after Holmes got beat by Mike Tyson in 1988.
That was a right hand, and down goes Holmes from a crashing right hand.
He retired from the sport. He will make a comeback in 91, get back in the ranks, upset the undefeated Ray Mercer to earn a shot to fight undisputed heavyweight champion Evander Holyfield at the age of 42. Holmes would have his moments, but he would come up short against Holyfield. Larry would find himself back in the picture fighting WBC champ Oliver McCall. McCall just coming off a big win beating Lennox Lewis. Holmes once again would come up short of capturing the heavyweight title, losing by a narrow unanimous decision, 115-114, 114-113 by the two judges. Razor thin. Holmes will get another shot, this time for the IBO title against undefeated Brian Nielsen in his backyard of Denmark. Many would say Holmes won this fight, and this was some home cooking. Holmes would a lot. Holmes would lose by a split decision to Nielsen after a couple fights against heavyweights from his era, James Smith and Mike Weaver. In 2002, Holmes' retirement fight would be against strongman contest legend Butterbean. Holmes putting on a show, doing what he does best and giving the crowd their money's worth. Holmes will win by unanimous decision, leaving the sport with the record of 69-6 and 44 knockouts. In 2008, Holmes will be inducted into the Hall of Fame.
He has parlayed his 4 rounds, but they have not really done much. There's another.
Butterbean has to reload.
So he's going backwards and taking like the Larry Holmes of old. May I add one's better? Oh, that's the my. Well, it didn't hurt Butterbean.
In 2015, after defeating Manny Pacquiao, Mayweather had a choice: pay the WBO sanction fees and pursue an undisputed unification with Kell Brook, or ditch the belt and explore more options. And since Berto became the WBA interim champ, defeating Josecito Lopez, and this was a fight that Al Heyman was trying to make between the two for many years, a cursed matchup no one asked for and no one wanted, and just the most unexpected events took place preventing this matchup from happening. But now it's actually happening. On paper, it sounds like it'll be a tough fight, but in reality, like the Carlos Baldomir fight, this would go down as one of Floyd's easiest title fights since the Baldomir fight. One judge had it a shutout, and the other two judges, well, gave Berto some participation rounds for his effort, when really this should have been a shutout. Floyd would vacate the belts and retire from the sport.
Floyd, be careful. I got you. Okay, like all right, baby. Make sure everything's good. All right, yes, sir.
This was really right around the time when Conor McGregor was calling out Floyd. Hype was building up in 2016, but that came to a pause as McGregor lost to Nate Diaz. After McGregor came back, beat Diaz, secured another big win against Eddie Alvarez, the hype train was back for this cross-universe matchup. Both parties fought tooth and nail to get this a 12-round fight. In order for it to be a 12-round fight, there has to be a belt organization to sanction this, and some type of belt on the line. The WBC came swooping in and greatly obliged to sanctioning this fight and coming up with a title specifically for this fight, which would be called the Money Belt. Since that was out the way, and my order could be wrong with this, McGregor's only side of this deal was getting his boxing license and proving to the commission he is capable of fighting 12 rounds. Since McGregor has no credentials in boxing, this is a standard procedure. The ESPN documentary of the Dewey Bozzella story highlighted this procedure since Dewey is not in the system. Dewey's test to get this license granted, he had to do 5 minutes on the jump rope, 5 minutes on the heavy bag, 5 minutes on the speed bag, 5 minutes on mid work, and lastly 3 3-minute rounds of sparring. Dewey passed almost every test but came up short in his sparring evaluation, and the commission saw that he was unfit to fight a 4-round fight.
Put me out there with a heavyweight when I'm a cruiserweight. He got me by at least 25 pounds. If you didn't take the advantage away from me, I guarantee it's a whole different fight. I probably would have dropped him. But how can I drop him if you take away my energy? He even said, yo, man, do you want me to fight this man, spar with this man after all the work you did with him? And y'all said, go out there and do it. And that's exactly what I did. It hurts. You taking away my dream. You taking away the only thing I got left.
Dewey would receive proper training from Bernard Hopkins' camp after they had reached out to him, and Dewey passed the test far more convincingly to be granted for his license.
You ready to go?
Give it to me.
You got it, man.
Go! What's up, homie? It's approved. Oh, yeah. That's what I'm talking about. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. That's what we do. Oh, yeah.
October 15th. October 15th, baby.
October 15th.
for McGregor, he will have to do a lot more than Dewey to prove that he is capable of going 12 rounds, which he passed and was given a license in the state of Nevada. In boxing history, there's only 22 champions, male and female, to ever retire undefeated. 16 out of that 22 have a perfect clean sheet record, so that means no draws, no contests. Rocky Marciano is the record holder of that at 49-0 across the board. This is the record most have aimed to beating. Most have failed just short of tying it. It's cursed, and Larry Holmes would probably say it's a protected record.
I feel that if a man is going to respond or talk about someone, he should read about him and know about him, and that's all I'm saying.
You're quite happy that Larry Holmes didn't break your brother's record.
Without question. I would think that a guy like Larry Holmes would understand that, the Marciano family wanted the record kept intact. It's a record that we're very proud of, and I'm very pleased that things are the way they are.
I'm pretty sure Roger and Floyd Sr. at one point was joking about how sought after and protected this record is. And it will be funny if Floyd beats the record fighting that MMA guy.
The greatest fighter in the world only come from one zone. The Midwest dominates the world of boxing. I ain't got to tell you that. Ask them up who got their ass beat by somebody from the Midwest. Then you'll know.
Not only Floyd beat the record, but this fight almost topped off the total pay-per-view sales of his fight with Pacquiao at 5.1 million buys. Outside of the money and the record being beaten, this bridged the gap between boxing fans, the boxing industry, and MMA altogether. The boxing business for the longest was trying to keep MMA out of business and banned in America. And this is a prime example of both industries putting their politics, bad blood, and past behind them and making something happen for the combat sports fans. After this fight, Floyd would happily retire from professional boxing, but he wouldn't retire from what he's best at, boxing and making money, which he's having a fun time doing that. Despite Grant boxing gloves prolonging Joe's career due to his bad hands.
Say as well, thanks to Elvis, these gloves are beautiful, man. Grant gloves, beautiful. Really felt good, man. Protecting my hands good. Cheers, Elvis.
Congratulations, champ. Jim?
That, incidentally, is a reference not to Elvis Presley, but to Elvis Grant, well-known boxing figure who is key executive at Grant Gloves, the gloves that Calzaghe wore to protect his often injured hands during the fight.
After his fight with Bernard Hopkins, he was highly advised to retire from his doctor. He decided to have one last fight. It was not promoted as Joe's last fight against top 5 ranked Roy Jones Jr., more than likely to avoid pressure.
After the Hopkins fight, I knew I was going to have one more fight, and that was it. I couldn't train. I couldn't train anymore. My hands were gone. Scan on my hand, I think it was after Manfredo, and he was telling me my hands deteriorating from all the needles I've had over the years, cortisones and painkillers. He gave me another scan. He said, Joe, seriously, you can't do this for much longer.
It started out rough for Joe as he was knocked down in the first round. He recovered very quickly and made it out of the first, and really started to treat this as his last dance and have fun in the fight, despite HBO not agreeing with his showboating, which is quite ironic. Joe was in the zone and continued on, which is insane, by the way, because Roy was literally trying to knock Joe out in the final half of the fight. I don't know if anyone noticed that, but he was really trying to trap Joe.
Punches that anyone has ever landed against him.
Joe was able to avoid all of Roy's traps and win by unanimous decision and retire from boxing 46-0 across the board.
He's right now got a record that's unbelievable. He's accomplished everything. Maybe consider his record, maybe one of the greatest fighters of all time when you look at it just as a record. I think he's going to get bigger and bigger each day that he's retired.
After Hasegawa was dethroned by Johnny Gonzalez for the WBC featherweight title, Hasegawa would move down to super bantamweight and make one last run at the title. Hasegawa was the bantamweight champ and had skipped super bantamweight to fight for the WBC featherweight title because there was a lot going on at super bantamweight at that time and he would have to do a lot of waiting to get that shot. He would move up the ranks of super bantamweight and find himself in a position to face IBF champ Kiko Martinez. Incredibly dirty fight. Hasegawa seemed to be off from a foul, and despite fighting through it, Kiko was able to get the TKO victory. Despite that being promoted as his last chance fight, I don't think he wanted to retire on that note. In most cases, Japanese fighters would retire on that note since it was a title fight. Hasegawa will go for this time one last title run.
右足首の靭帯を一部断裂。
His run would start off rocky as he had injured his ankle literally days before the fight. He somehow managed to put on one of his best performances against undefeated prospect Horacio Garcia, which really was the fight to put him in position for the title shot. After one more fight as a tune-up, Hasegawa was set up to face hard-punching champion Hugo Ruiz. Hugo just came off a massive win, obliterating Julio Ceja in 51 seconds to capture the title. Japanese and American press had high doubts the old former champ had a chance of beating Ruiz.
間に合わなければ片腕だけでも試合をする。このチャンスを逃すと次のチャンスはいつ来るかわからない。
It was shockingly even, and Hasegawa was looking relatively well. But what most was fearing who followed Hasegawa happened, where Ruiz finally cracked him and hurt him in the second half of the 9th round. Hasegawa found himself on the ropes, and Ruiz was about to go for the finish. Hasegawa, knowing this was his last chance in this position to win a title, strategically lets his hands go in a similar fashion what he did against Simone Maludrotu in 2008. And somehow everything Hasegawa threw landed, and everything Ruiz threw missed or glanced. Hasegawa won the exchange and backs Ruiz up, who acknowledges Hazumi's heart. That exchange messed up Ruiz's nose and eye. Ruiz was unable to continue due to the damage he took from that barrage, being forced to retire from the fight, making Hasegawa a 3-time 3-division world champion. When Hasegawa won his first world title, he carried his son. When Hasegawa won his final world title, his son was finally old enough to pick him up. Just a wholesome way to end his career off. With a record of 36-5 and 16 knockouts, Hasegawa will happily retire as a champion, where he's still seen quite often in the spotlight, either as a commentator and making numerous appearances on the Japanese TV show Seiyanen, where before they were covering his training camps and his journey throughout his career, to where he's performing challenges against athletes from different walks of life. And on top of that, this is when boxers go out happy. For more installments, be sure to like, share, and if you're new, subscribe. Subscribe to the Patreon for Patreon-backed projects and early access. This Patreon-backed project is on the tale of Floyd Mayweather versus Ricky Hatton. I'm Alpha Sancho, and I'm out.